Hi everyone, Luke here from Weekend Tour Pros. We're back in the studio today to do another ball review, and this time it's another ball review requested by you guys watching down the lens. You asked me to review the Kirkland Performance Plus V2 golf ball because you guys kept telling me it's one of the best performing, best priced golf balls out there on the market. So what we're going to do today is we're going to stick it head to head against the #1 ball in golf, the Titleist Pro V1, and see just how good this Kirkland ball is, and is it really the best value premium golf ball on the market? Let's find out. Before we start the test, just going to tell you a little bit about the Kirkland Performance Plus V2 golf ball. It's a 3-piece urethane cover golf ball, exactly the same as the Titleist Pro V1, and it is a 94 compression golf ball, so that puts it in kind of similar range to lots of tour balls at the slightly firmer end of golf balls. For some perspective, the Pro V1 is about an 87 compression rating and the Pro V1X is about a 97 compression rating, so it's somewhere between the middle of both of those two golf balls. Now it's really hard to understand what to expect from this golf ball because when you read the write-up on the Costco UK website, it talks about words like optimized ball flight rather than saying it's a high or a low ball flight. But from what I understand from reading some other reviews, including my Golf Spy, is that I am expecting this ball to be quite a high spinning ball throughout the bag, and that is something I struggle with, so I'm really keen to see if we get that and we don't compromise too much distance in the process. In terms of a price point, the Titleist Pro V1 is probably one of the most expensive golf balls on the market at £47.99 in the UK for a dozen. In terms of the Kirkland, you can actually pick up 2 dozen of these for £32.98 on the Costco UK website at the moment, making them about £16.49 a dozen. That's almost a third of the price of the Titleist Pro V1. Now, when I was looking on their website, you do have to buy 2 boxes at the same time, so that means buying 4 dozen, but it still means you're getting 4 dozen of these golf balls for about 1 and a bit of the dozens of the Titleist Pro V1, so it makes it incredibly good value as well. So let's just see how it performs. Okay, just going to explain how we're going to do the video today. So I'm going to start off by hitting a 20 to 25 yard chip shot with a 60-degree wedge to test that kind of greenside capability of the balls and their spin characteristics. We'll then move up to hitting full shots with pitching wedge, 7-iron and driver, just to see how they compare through the various parts of the bag. I'm in the bay for about 2 hours today, going to be hitting absolute hundreds of shots here. I'll be absolutely sweating by the end of it. What you're going to see there is a small handful of some of those shots, and then I'll show you all the aggregated data from each part of the test. Let's get stuck in. Okay, so just done hitting the 20-25 yard pitch shot with the 60-degree wedge, and first impressions are that, yeah, both balls felt really similar. Couldn't notice too much of a distinct difference. Both got a kind of slightly clippier sound than I'm used to playing a softer ball. But in terms of spin numbers, I did see a couple with the Kirkland that were in the 5,000s, which did keep up and kind of compete with the Pro V1. Did notice it launched a little bit higher than the Pro V1, but I'm keen to get home, look at the data side by side, and just see if those feels are backed up. Let's do that now. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at the data from that 20 to 25 yard chip shot with the 60-degree wedge. Now, you just heard me say in the bay that I was really struggling to separate these two balls on that short game shot, and the data backs that up even more closely than I thought it was going to be. Starting on the left-hand side, you can see that my club head speed and my ball speeds were exactly the same with both of these balls, meaning that I was putting the same amount in and getting the same amount out. What we can see, however, though, is there is an average of 500 revs of more spin with the Kirkland. The Kirkland is spinning more than a Pro V1 on a short game shot. I can't believe that. In terms of the carry number and the total, you can see that these are very similar, almost identical, and we can also see that the launch angle, peak height and land angle with both of these balls was also identical. Now, I did say in the bay that I thought that the Kirkland did pop up a little bit on a couple of occasions, and I definitely did see that, but when you look at the aggregated data, you can see that they are very comparable in terms of their ball flights. What that does say to me is you might get the odd inconsistency in terms of the Kirkland just popping up a little bit, but that could have also been down to my ability to strike the ball consistently as a mid-handicap golfer. Overall though, a really strong start for the Kirkland. Let's get into those pitching wedges. Okay, so just finished hitting the pitching wedge shots with the Kirkland and the Pro V1, and my first impressions are I'm a little bit stunned by the Kirkland here. I was told it was a spinny ball. It's definitely done that. It was spinning well over 7,000 in the batch of shots, which was consistently more than I was getting out of the Pro V1, and it seemed to be launching in a really nice window as well with some really good distance. So yeah, mind blown a little bit by that, but need to get home and just look at the numbers side by side and see if those feels I had are backed up in the data. So you just heard me say in the bay that my mind was blown by the performance that I was seeing in the bay with the pitching wedge, and I'm really pleased to see that the data just backs that up once again. This Kirkland is off to a really strong start. If we look at the club head speed, you can see that my club head speed was virtually identical with both of these balls, but I was getting slightly more ball speed out of the Kirkland at 94.6 versus 93.2, and it's backed up in the smash factor, which is slightly higher with the Kirkland, proving that it was a slightly more efficient ball for me with a pitching wedge. Just like I felt in the bay, the spin rate was 500 revs, once again more than that Pro V1, exactly the same as we saw in that 20 to 25 yard chip shot, that it was 500 revs more than the Pro V1, and consistently above that 7,000 mark. The worry when you get a bit too much spin with a handicap golfer is that maybe you lose a little bit of distance. That certainly wasn't the case with the pitching wedge. You can see that here I was carrying the pitching wedge on average 120.6 yards versus 119.4 with the Pro V1, so 1.2 yards longer with the Kirkland. In terms of those launch angles, I was saying that I felt like the Kirkland was launching in a really nice window. You can see that it launched a fraction lower than the Pro V1, but the peak heights and the land angles were absolutely identical across all of the batches of shots here. So the Kirkland once again has performed absolutely fantastic and nearly identical to the Pro V1, except for that fraction more spin. What a start from this golf ball. Let's see if it carries on as we move into the 7-iron. Okay, so initial impressions after hitting the batch of shots with the 7-iron with the Pro V1 versus the Kirkland is the Kirkland did seem to drop off a little bit here. I just couldn't get the same ball speeds out of it despite a very similar club head speed. 108 roughly was the max I could get out of the Kirkland, and I was regularly getting shots with 110 with the Pro V1. Also felt like the Kirkland wasn't going as far. It was also going a little bit lower and with a less steep descent angle, so my ability to hold a green with this ball probably felt a little bit weaker compared to the Pro V1, and it also wasn't as long or as fast. But let's go home and look at the data side by side to see if those feels are backed up. Okay, so you just heard me say in the bay that I started to see a slight drop off with the Kirkland as we moved up through the bag and hit those 7-irons, and that is backed up in the data, but I don't think it's overly significant. Let me know what you think. So the club head speed with both of these balls was virtually identical, 77.3 versus 77.6, but I did get an extra 1.3 mile an hour of ball speed out of the Pro V1 versus the Kirkland on average. I did say in the bay that I thought the Kirkland was around the 108 mark. It actually was around 109, so a little bit faster than I felt, but I did see quite a few shots with the Pro V1 that were over 110. I think I only had one that reached that number with the Kirkland. We can see though the Kirkland has continued its trend of being a spinnier golf ball than the Pro V1, this time by only about 200 revs, but if you're someone like me who needs a bit of extra spin to help keep that ball in the air, then definitely worth considering the Kirkland because it is proving itself to be a really good high spin golf ball. In terms of carry number, we can see the Kirkland has fell away a little bit here, 152.5 yards for the Kirkland versus 156.9 yards for the Pro V1. So that Pro V1 is 4.4 yards of longer carry than the Kirkland. That's almost half a club, so that does feel like a little bit of distance to be giving away versus the Pro V1. In terms of launch angle, you heard me say in the bay that I felt like it was launching a little bit lower. That is also backed up in the numbers here. 16.1 degree of launch versus 17.5 with the Pro V1, and that peak height of 69 feet was about 10% lower than what I was getting out of the Pro V1, and I also had 2.1 degrees of less steepness into the green. So overall, my ability to control the Kirkland and hold a green was slightly reduced despite that fraction more spin against the Pro V1, and I was also giving up a little bit of carry distance in the 7-iron. However, these are some really strong numbers compared to other golf balls I've tested, and we need to consider that we are competing against the #1 ball in golf. Let's see how the trends continue as we move up to the driver. Okay, just done finishing hitting the drivers then. I must admit I'm absolutely shattered now. I've probably hit about 50, 60 drivers just then. Yeah, initial impressions in the bay between those two balls. I think the Kirkland, again, very similar to the 7-iron, just didn't get out there as far with as much ball speed as the Pro V1. But let's get home and look at those two sets of numbers. So you just heard me say in the bay there that I thought the driver performed really similar to how the 7-iron performed. It's maybe not as bad as that, and there is some subtle differences, so let's take a look at that data. First of all, on the left hand side, you can see my club head speed with both of these balls was virtually identical. However, you can see one of the negatives to the Kirkland ball with the driver. That ball speed has dropped off quite significantly. 130.4 mile an hour on average is 3.6 mile an hour less than I was getting at the Pro V1 at 134 mile an hour. With the driver as a shorter hitter, I certainly don't want to be giving up any ball speed, and that is something you would have to consider if, like me, you aren't the longest golfer. However, one thing we do talk about with driver is we do talk about that high launch and that low spin, and what we can see here is the Kirkland actually was slightly higher launching than the Pro V1, 13.7 degrees versus 12.5 degrees, and that's really interesting because it's flipped itself back around from what we saw with the 7-iron where the Kirkland was slightly lower launching. We have seen a consistency in that spin profile. Once again, the Kirkland did spin a little bit more than the Pro V1, an extra 200 revs again, and that is really interesting to see. It's very similar to the difference in spin profile that we saw with the 7-iron. What does that mean overall in terms of distance? Well, you can see that actually in terms of carry distance, there isn't a lot in it. The Kirkland had a total carry distance of 204.6 yards versus the Pro V1 at 205.8 yards, only 1.2 yards in it. However, what you can see is that overall package and that overall total distance, there was a bit more of a discrepancy. The Pro V1 was 237.6 yards and it was 231.5, so 6.1 yards less with the Kirkland. So overall, a little bit less distance with the driver. But again, these are really strong numbers for such a value ball. Let's wrap up with my concluding thoughts. Okay, we're coming towards the end of the video now, and I just want to give you my concluding thoughts on the Kirkland Performance Plus 2.0 golf ball. What we could see at the bottom end of the bag is that this golf ball performed virtually identical to a Titleist Pro V1, even spinning a little bit more in both that short game shot and that pitching wedge with 500 revs of more spin in both parts of the test. So if you are someone who needs a bit more spin on those short game shots, or maybe a bit more ability to hold a green with a pitching wedge, you should definitely give this golf ball a test. As we did move up through the bag, we did see some slight drop-offs in terms of that carry distance with the 7-iron and then that ball speed with the driver, but the fact that we're even talking about this golf ball performing consistently throughout the bag and competing against the Titleist Pro V1 is absolute testament to just how good this golf ball is. Now, one thing I would note is that recently I did a test where I put 4 premium golf balls side by side to work out which is the best for an average swing speed golfer. If you've not seen that video yet, I'll put a link to it up there in the corner for you. During that test, I did see that the TaylorMade TP5 was a slightly more spinny golf ball than the Titleist Pro V1, exactly the same as what we've seen from the Kirkland throughout this test. Now, once again, the fact that we're talking about the Kirkland in the same breath as a Titleist Pro V1 or a TaylorMade TP5 is once again just testament to the quality of this golf ball and just how impressed I was with it throughout the test. The final thing I would say is the price point is absolutely unbelievable. The fact that you can buy a dozen premium constructed 3-piece urethane cover golf balls for a third of the price of a Titleist Pro V1 and get the performance that we've seen today, it's just mind-blowing. However, there is one caveat to that. When I was looking on the Costco website, I had to buy 4 dozen of these online in the UK. Now, it might be a little bit different if you go into store, and it might be a bit different for you guys in the US, and I'd be really keen for you guys to tell me in the comments below if you can buy them in just a single dozen. Now, for me, the reason why that's a caveat is if I was going to give this golf ball a test, I'd be looking to buy a sleeve of it, at worst case, given the price point, maybe a dozen of it, but the idea that I've potentially got to spend £65 in the UK and buy 4 dozen, and then maybe don't get on with the golf ball is maybe the one thing that would put me off. But I definitely think if you can get hold of a sleeve of these, get hold of a dozen, maybe go halves with a friend, it's definitely worth giving a go because the price point's fantastic and the performance numbers are really strong as well. So thank you to all of you that recommended in the comments that I'd give this golf ball a test. I think once again, the viewers have been proven right. This is an absolutely fantastic golf ball. Now, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. If you have liked the video, please do consider giving it a thumbs up. It really does help other like-minded golfers on YouTube to find my content. And if you're not yet subscribed yet, what have you been up to? Subscribe to the channel and you'll get notified of all my videos as they land every week on YouTube. And I'd really love to have you as a follower of the Weekend Tour Pros movement. Thank you so much for watching my video. Have a great day. Keep on that quest to become a Weekend Tour Pro. Goodbye.